Good morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Matt Peterson. We are live this morning on Facebook. We're live also on cbsphilly.com/Weather Week. It is the first day of Severe Weather Week here at CBS Philly. We're going to be going all week long. Starts today, the 23rd, goes through Friday. We're going to be breaking down all the different types of severe weather, everything from tornadoes, which is what we'll be talking about today, through lightning. We'll be talking about flash flooding. We'll also just be talking about severe weather in general, breaking down what this with the Storm Prediction Center out in Normal, Oklahoma, what they go through a little bit later on in the week. And it's going to include all of us here at the CBS Philly weather team. It's going to be myself. I'm Matt Peterson, like I said. But we'll also have Katie Falinger. She'll be along in the next couple of days doing her Facebook Live and CBS Philly Post. She was also here on early this morning, of course, from 4:30 to 7, breaking down some safety tips for everybody when it comes to tornadic activity. And then we'll be talking to Lauren Casey as well as Chelsea Ingram later on today. And then through the week, all of us, again, are going to be talking about different various types of severe weather here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all the way into the end of the week. So we are excited about what we're going to be talking about. Of course, as meteorologists, this is some of the more intense and definitely some of the more interesting types of severe weather, the most interesting types of weather just kind of in general that we get to deal with. And now, while the Northeast isn't always the most active when it comes to severe weather, we still have our fair share of bad weather throughout the springtime into the summertime as well. We're not just going to be talking about the tornadoes. We're not just going to be talking about those strong winds. We actually will break down a little bit of some of the issues that we get with heat and some of the problems we can have with that extreme heat that we get here definitely in Philly. We all know it gets hot, it gets humid in June, July, August. We have those heat index values well up into the triple digits. So we'll be talking a little bit about that a little bit later on in the week as well. But like I said, today is Monday, and Monday Severe Weather Day is tornadoes. That's our big theme for our Monday. What we're going to be talking about today, of course, Katie already talked a little bit earlier this morning during our morning show, again, about that safety, about what kids need to know, about what the families need to know. If there is a tornado that comes close to your area, if you do get caught in a tornado warning, which does happen here across the Philadelphia area, if you do get caught in one of those, she talked about getting to some of the safer areas of the house, the interior rooms. We'll be talking about getting down into the basement as well. We're going to go over some of those safety tips here during our Facebook Live, but then we'll also be breaking down some other things later on today. At noon today, Chelsea's going to be talking to us a little bit about the history of tornadoes here in the Philadelphia area and across the Delaware Valley, seeing what counties has more tornadoes than others. When the last couple of times that we've had some tornadic activity here for Philadelphia County itself. I'll break down some of that before we get to the noontime hour today in this Facebook Live and on cbsphilly.com. And then later on in our evening shows in that 5 to 6:30 time frame, Lauren Casey is going to be talking to us about climate change and how climate change and global warming is affecting tornadic activity. Is it increasing that tornadic activity? Is it maybe dialing it down a little bit? We're going to be breaking down, she'll be breaking down those aspects again in the 5 o'clock hour. And then through about 6:15, Kate's going to be jumping in with her, of course, during the newscast. She'll be talking about what are called bow echoes. There's another form of very potent, strong winds that come through with severe thunderstorms that those also can spin up tornadoes as well. She'll be breaking down what a bow echo is and how they interact with tornadoes. And then we'll be talking as we get into the 10 o'clock time frame. Kate will be breaking down what are called fire tornadoes. They usually happen when there's extreme wildfire danger. There's a little bit of a change that goes on, and she'll be breaking down those chances, what you see with those fire tornadoes and what they actually are in general as well. So as I said, this is our severe weather week. I want to talk a little bit about just why I like severe weather, why I got into weather, because it has to do with tornadoes, which of course is our big theme for today. So of course we all know that tornadoes are in general the most recognizable form of severe weather that we deal with, whether it is here in the Philadelphia area or if it is even just across the country. That's where we always have the biggest problem is with those tornadoes. And while they are the most worrisome, they're the most intense form of severe weather that we deal with this time of year across the country and here in Philly. The good news for us here in the Northeast, across New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, is the fact that tornadoes, while they happen, they're not overly common. But when they do happen, they can still cause some issues. And again, we'll be breaking those down in just a little bit. Also in this live chat, we're going to be taking your questions. So if you do have any questions throughout the entirety of this broadcast, please feel free on Facebook Live, or if you happen to be on cbsphilly.com, there is a way for you to get in touch with us. You can ask us any kinds of questions that have to do with tornadoes. I'll do my best to answer them. I have some we'll call them fun facts about tornadoes. So if you do have any kind of statistical questions, how many we get in Philadelphia, how many we get in Pennsylvania throughout the year, I'm going to try to answer some of those questions as well. And hopefully maybe somewhere along the lines you'll learn something. Maybe I'll learn something from anybody out there that has any stories about tornadic activity. Please feel free to share those as well. Before we get into really what forms a tornado and how long they last, all of those kind of things, I want to share something with you folks out there, and that's that tornadoes are the reason that I got into weather, and it's the reason that I became a meteorologist. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I actually saw my first tornado. I was down in Virginia, Chincoteague Island, down on the Delmarva. I'm not sure how many people out there are maybe familiar with that area of Virginia, but I was down there family vacation with cousins. We were having a good time. It was a ball. We were really enjoying ourselves. And then all of a sudden a storm started to roll in off of the Atlantic Ocean, and it actually spawned a waterspout out over the Atlantic. So if you're not sure what that is, a waterspout is just a tornado, usually relatively weak, that forms out over a body of water. So out over the Atlantic Ocean, there formed this tornado, a waterspout, and at 7 years old, I was kind of astounded. I was surprised. I didn't know what that was. And I actually, instead of leaving the beach, the lifeguards are getting us all out there. You know, my parents are taking me back up off the beach, and I kind of broke away from my dad, and I took his camera and I ran down on the beach and took a couple pictures, and I took them in for show and tell when I was 7 years old. So from then on, I was sold. I was curious about what I was looking at, why it was forming, what it was, and my grandpa gave me a weather book, and he used to read it to me, and my parents used to read all those great stories, and it really was just something that really piqued my interest at an early age, to the point where even when I was in middle school, I wrote research papers on hurricanes and tornadoes when I was in 7th and 8th grade. So from a long time ago, it really got me interested in what weather was, why it was happening, and then of course the tornadic activity is something that is just very intense, and it's very interesting when it comes to meteorologists, and pretty much anybody I think out there really wants to know why tornadoes happen, because they are so destructive and they really kind of do cause a whole lot of problems. So enough about me, enough about what I learned. Let's go in and let's talk about what actually a tornado is, how they form, where they form, all those kind of really good things, the things that get us interested in all of this kind of very intense weather. So let's go in and let's talk about that formation of tornadic activity. So we'll start with our picture here. This is Tornado Alley. I mean, I think most people are usually pretty up to date on where Tornado Alley is. A lot of people think of it just as maybe Oklahoma and Kansas. That's not necessarily the case. It does pretty much include all of the central portions of the United States. Now in red, we've outlined the areas that are most susceptible to tornadoes in what we like to deem maybe the bullseye area of Tornado Alley. But all the way out into Utah, Oklahoma, you can see tornadic activity, and then even maybe further into northern Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, anywhere where you get that warm, moist air, you get those strong, potent thunderstorms in this springtime and into the early summer. Anytime that you get that, you really have a chance to have some tornadic activity develop. But again, Tornado Alley generally in the midsection of the United States, of course, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, but all the way up into parts of South Dakota, Iowa, and even Minnesota as well. And when we talk about tornado formation, we usually kind of oversimplify it here. So while this isn't the maybe biggest, most in-depth scientific approach to why they form, it's definitely a pretty good indication of where and why things happen, at least in a general sense. So in that Tornado Alley area, we have, especially in the springtime, cold air still kind of working its way south from the North Pole, and then we have that warm, moist air coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and they clash together. And when we have that mixing in the atmosphere, we get those tornadoes, or not the tornadoes, but we get thunderstorms to form. And especially down in the southeast and south central portions of the U.S., we get what is called a wind shear profile. This is where we have the change in direction and speed of the wind in height. So we start here at the surface, you know, down near the ground, the air might be coming out of the south. We have that southerly wind pumping in all that warm and moist air. But then as you go up maybe a couple of 100 feet, what we're going to be looking at is actually some breeze and some upper level winds that maybe are coming out of the west, maybe they're coming out of the northwest. And as you go up in the atmosphere, they start to spin. We get those changes in speed and direction. Again, that is called our wind shear. And as the rotating column of air starts to spin, it gets a little bit stronger, it spins a little bit faster, it kind of feeds on itself. We get that rotation, and then that rotation is what gives us those updrafts that rotate, and then of course that is what gives us the tornado itself. So these all form in what are severe thunderstorms. They're very, very strong. They are definitely ones that we definitely don't want to, mess with when we're out there when it comes to this severe weather. Again, a couple questions already. Let's go to our Facebook page here after we kind of take a quick break, after we take a look at, again, what was our tornado formation. So Lena, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She's giving us this question from Facebook. She says, if we're alerted to a tornado warning, how much time should we have to prepare typically? Like if we're out and about, would we have a good amount of time to get somewhere safe? Well, Lena, this is a really good question, and it kind of leads us into the difference between a watch and a warning, which we'll still get into a little bit later on this week. We'll dive a little bit deeper into what all these different words and terms mean when it comes to severe weather. But when you talk about strictly how much time you're going to have, especially if you're outdoors, to get somewhere safe, typically when you have a tornado watch, we'll start with a watch, it lasts a little bit longer. We're talking on the magnitude of possibly a day. So if you do know that there is going to be bad weather, there's a tornado watch that's been issued by the National Weather Service, maybe for a Monday at 7 o'clock in the afternoon, or excuse me, 7 o'clock in the morning through 7 o'clock in the evening. That is an indication that there are some ingredients out there for tornadoes to form. It doesn't mean that they're going to form. It doesn't mean that there's one happening right now. It just means that out there in the atmosphere, in the time frame of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., there could potentially be a tornado that forms. Now, what happens if we get a tornado to actually form? There's a warning that is issued by the National Weather Service as well. So when the tornado warning is issued, we're talking then on the magnitude of maybe minutes to maybe at most an hour. So if you are out and about, maybe you're out there and you're enjoying your picnic, you know the tornado watch is out, but you still decide, well, I'm going to go out. It doesn't look too bad. I really think that even if there's a watch, you shouldn't go outside. You shouldn't be doing anything in the outdoor activities if you really don't have to. But if you are outside and say there is a tornado warning that is issued, we're talking, again, about the magnitude of maybe minutes to at most maybe an hour. So if you are outside, you need to get to shelter immediately, whether that is underneath a pavilion, whether you're talking about getting in your car and keeping yourself safe that way. But really, when a warning is issued, you're talking, you need to get into your safe place immediately. You don't want to take any kind of time getting to where you're going to get to that safe area. So again, with the watch, I would suggest that you don't do things outside, but if you do happen to be outside and there's a warning issued, you want to definitely get to your safe place as quickly as possible. We like to say get there immediately as soon as that warning is issued, because that storm could be on top of you. Some of these travel at 60 to 70 miles an hour. These thunderstorms, they could be on top of you in a matter of maybe even 1 to 2 minutes at the quickest. We'll go a little bit further down our list here. So Aaron says, when should we expect tornadoes in Oklahoma? And we had a late start to them. Does May look scary? So far, I will say that so far in in the year of 2018, we have had about 66 tornadoes so far this year across the country. Now, that doesn't just include Oklahoma. That includes everywhere that has seen a tornado. We've had 66 official tornadoes so far this year. Asking in particular about Oklahoma, it's really hard to tell and really hard to forecast exactly how many tornadoes are going to happen in any particular place, even an area as wide as Oklahoma. I know a lot of folks, when we do have severe weather and bad weather, they want to know when it's going to hit. When is it going to be in Delaware County? When's it going to be in Havertown? When's it going to be in the Hatboro-Horsham area of Montgomery County? When's it going to be moving through Center City? When's it going to be, in Willingboro, New Jersey? That's what we need to know when we're in the immediate vicinity of these storms. But when we're talking about the widespread prediction of how many tornadoes we're going to see anywhere, it's really too hard to tell. There's really no way for us to know exactly how many tornadoes are going to form here in the Philadelphia area or even out into the Midwest where there is a better chance for those tornadoes to form. So right now, again, we've had 66 total through the year, but unfortunately we're not really able to forecast how many we'll have for the rest of the year. All I have to say is we are just getting into the beginning of tornado season, and again, you need to be careful all the way throughout, even until probably about August or so for lots of those places in the Midwest. Go over to our cbsphilly.com/weather week page as well, getting some good comments from people on there. The first one, this was from just about 3 minutes ago. This comes in from Paige. She asks, how long do tornadoes typically last? They can last a variety of times. They can last as quickly as maybe 1 to 2 minutes, but they can also last as long as 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes even longer. So it really kind of depends on the storm itself, and then it depends what our ingredients are within the atmosphere. So we need the heat. We need that upward rotation. We need that wind shear from the ground up into the upper levels of the atmosphere. We need all of that going on at the same time. And when the storm moves, it's going to move from point A, which all of the ingredients are there. All the ingredients are ready for us to have that tornado to form. But as it travels to the east, travels at that 50, 60, 70 mile an hour clip, it's moving into different areas of the atmosphere. It's encountering different things along the ground. It's encountering friction. It's going to be encountering maybe a house. It could be encountering a car. It could just have bumpy ground. And all of that plays into how long these tornadoes are going to last. And so as it progresses, as these storms progress, there is a chance that it moves into an area where the upper level ingredients aren't there. The friction along the ground helps to kind of kill it off as well. And maybe the tornado only lasts 5 minutes. But you could have another area where it moves into, and then we have all the ingredients are still there. There's nothing that's ripping it up from the ground. And those are the tornadoes that can last for a long time. They're the ones that we call a PDS situation, or a particularly dangerous situation, when we have these long track tornadoes, when we have these very powerful storms that last for possibly 20, 30, 40 minutes. And those are the times that we really have the biggest issues when it comes to tornadic activity. Let's talk a little bit also about, let's go down. I have a couple little other ideas here. I want to talk just a little bit about what it's like to be in the Midwest when these hit, or the South. I've been in Iowa as well as Arkansas throughout my time in television. I worked in far northwest Iowa, and then I worked in Little Rock, Arkansas as well. So right smack dab in the middle of that tornado alley. And when you have these situations that come through, they become very intense for everybody involved. They become very problematic for the communities out there, not just in the idea of potentially the loss of life. That is the very most catastrophic. That's the worst thing that can happen, is we can have fatalities, obviously, in these very potent storms. But even if no one passes away, which is never what we want to happen, you're still dealing with problems within the communities when it comes to damage to houses. You're talking about damage, especially when I worked in Iowa. We have lots of farmers, of course, in the midsection of the United States. Their barns, their equipment, even their fields in general. We're just now starting to get into the time where there's some planting going on. We're starting to see some of the crops start to sprout. They're starting to grow. And if a tornado comes through and rips all of that ground up, it could be acres and acres of land that get ripped up. That's a lot of money for those sometimes small communities that really have a hard time recouping that farming income. So there's a lot of impacts that go along with a lot of these issues, instead of just that loss of life, which of course we again never want to see happen. But that's where everybody's head goes, is, oh my God, my house is going to blow over, and then someone could potentially die. So that is of course the worst, but there are still plenty of other issues that go along with all of this tornadic activity. Let's go back to our graphics here. We'll talk a little bit about the scale of each of these tornadoes that could potentially come through. So we talked about how they form. Some are stronger than others if they're in the area where the ingredients are really ripe for that tornadic activity. You can get one to form. And then we have what is called the enhanced Fujita scale. It's called the enhanced Fujita scale because it's changed over the last, we'll call it about 50 years or so, but it used to be called the Fujita scale. It was named after Theodore Fujita from the University of Chicago. He was the first one that coined these categories. He originally called them F, 0 through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in 2007, there was some studies done, and the National Weather Service went back and broke down what it was looking at when it came to destruction, when it came to loss of life. And they decided to change the scale just a little bit, and they've now called it the Enhanced Fujita scale. So it's the EF0 through EF5. And those winds that you see on the side, we consider those estimates. We have not been able to actually get inside of a tornado and measure how fast the winds are inside an actual tornado. It just hasn't been done yet. There are scientists that are trying to model what goes on within a tornado. There are scientists out there, there's meteorologists out there that are trying to break down what is actually happening in the atmosphere inside of that funnel to know just how fast those winds are, what causes them to be so fast, what causes all of this destruction. But because there's such a small scale event, a micro scale event as we like to call it in meteorology, we're not able to actually physically get in there and see everything. So these winds that we actually see are estimate, and they're based on what is destroyed in the path of the tornado. So when we have that EF0 range, we consider it, we'll call it minor, quote unquote, but there's no such thing as a minor tornado. I don't want anybody to ever think that, oh, well, it's just an EF0. It's not that big a deal. Some of EF0s can cause plenty of damage. They can cause plenty of problems. And of course, as you work your way up to that EF5, that catastrophic range where we have winds potentially over 200 miles an hour, we're really talking about some widespread, again, that catastrophic damage. So again, as we take a look at our Enhanced Fujita scale there, 65 to 85 mile an hour winds in that EF0 range. And that is an estimate. Again, it's based on when the tornado moves past. We'll send out a storm survey. The National Weather Service will send out a survey of other meteorologists, and they'll go and they'll take a look. What was broken? What was destroyed? Was there a house that was taken down? Were there trees that were taken down? Was a car pushed? And then they'll take all of that information, they put it together in a report, and then they'll estimate how strong they think the winds were within the storm. So if they think that the winds were maybe 65 to 85 miles an hour, maybe that means that there were certain branches of trees that were maybe 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Those were blown around. When you get up into that maybe EF2 range, 111 to 135, you're talking about a garage that's blown over, maybe a standing structure, even a house could have some damage to it. We're talking about walls that are coming down, that are crumbling. Most likely in that EF2 range, it's probably a wood frame house. A wood frame structure is starting to really see considerable damage done to it in that 111 to 135 range. And then as we get into the EF3, EF4 range, that's where we see the heavier structures, the cement structures, the stone structures starting to crumble, really starting to get extreme damage done to things that you would consider relatively sturdy. Again, not just a wood frame house, but we're talking about things that are metal frames, as well as those heavy wood and cement frames. And then as you get up into the EF5 range, catastrophic, we're talking about complete destruction of all and any structures in the area that get pushed into that path from the catastrophic EF5 tornado. So that's, again, what we're dealing with when it comes to the different categories. And all of those, again, are estimated ranges of what meteorologists think the winds could be. And that's done based on wind tunnel exercises where you'll see meteorologists hold up maybe a wooden frame wall, a roof, something like that in a wind tunnel, and they'll just continue to bombard it with some very strong winds, and then we'll see how high those winds get and when that damage occurs, and that's how we're able to estimate some of this Enhanced Fujita scale ranges. Let's go back to our questions here as we get through our second topic. We got one from, let's see, Paige is asking all kinds of questions on cbsphilly.com. I love it. Let's see if we can find someone else, though, I think. Well, all right, so let's go back to Paige since she is all over this. She's saying, how far away from the tornado is a safe zone? When it comes to far away from the tornado, you want to be as far away as you possibly can. There's no particular range that is, we'll say, safer than others because tornadoes are known to pick up debris and throw it. If you're not familiar with this, you can always go on YouTube, you can go on the computer, and you can find videos of debris getting thrown around all over the place. We're talking anything from some small items. There's been known to see pieces of paper, checks, even books, those kind of things that people have in their house. We've been able to see them be thrown as far away as even 10 to 50 miles with some of those lighter range objects. Now, if the heavier objects, even though tornadoes have been known to pick up and move cars, those kind of things, those are very small increments that those are going to be moved. So in general, you just want to get inside. You want to be in an enclosed, most likely underground space to make yourself safe. So there's no real range that you need to get out of to make yourself safe. You just want to get away and get underground and inside into a shelter more than anything else before you worry about getting far enough away. Let's see if we have anything else here on Facebook right now. It looks like we don't have, do we have another question on our Facebook Live? Let's see. So Aaron also asked, what is a bow echo and a low level lock? A bow echo is just a very intense area of winds that get pushed out, and it looks like a bow and arrow. It looks like the bow that you'd shoot a bow and arrow with. So that's why we call it a bow structure. Again, Kate's going to break it down. Bow echoes a little bit later on tonight. So if you want to, make sure you're tuning in at 10 o'clock at 6:15 this evening, and you'll get all the information that you need to know on bow echoes. And let's see. So thanks for the update. Thanks, Valerie, for checking in. Dawn asked, are we under severe weather advisory? No, we are not under a severe weather advisory. This is just our severe weather awareness week to get you prepared as we get into our severe weather season. But don't worry, there is no severe weather issues right now outside. We are A-OK. So just real quickly, we're starting to get towards the end of our Facebook Live time here, but let's talk about our safety issues, because that's a huge thing. We were just talking about if we're under an advisory right now. We are not. But if we were, if there is a tornado warning that was issued that came through right now, this is what you need to do when one is issued. You need to seek shelter immediately. And when we say seek shelter, we mean get inside. The most safe place that you can be is an underground tornado shelter. That's really where you want to be. But if you're not able to do that, say you don't have that kind of shelter at your house, but you're at home, you want to get inside your house and get down to the basement. If you don't have a basement, you want to put as many walls in between yourself and the outside as you can. So what we mean by that is get to an interior room, get to an interior bathroom, get to an interior living room, something that doesn't have a lot of windows. But again, put as many walls in between yourself and the outside as possible. And we tell you to do that because then if there is flying debris, it has to go through more walls, it has to go through more structures to get to where you are. And as I said, you want to stay away from those windows if you're out, if you are in your home, and always stay alert with CBS 3. You can stay alert with us here for the Eyewitness Weather Team. We'll, of course, be on air as much as we can if there is a tornado, and we'll also be on social media as well. So you always want to stay tuned to CBS 3 for all of that information if we ever did end up being in a tornado warning. Also want to just break down a couple facts for everybody out there. Philadelphia tornadoes, the last one we had was May 18th of 2011. So it wasn't all that long ago that Philadelphia itself actually had a tornado that came through the area. So if you were around in the 2011 timeframe, I'm sure that you remember that. And I don't want to break down this too much because Chelsea will be getting into this a little bit later. And here is our breakdown. So the modern era of tornado chasing is started in 1950. These are from 1950 through present day. These are how many tornadoes have occurred per county in the surrounding area. And you can see some of the higher areas there out there in Lancaster and Berks County have actually seen some of the higher amounts in Chester County as well, up over 20 or so tornado warnings, actually reported tornadoes, I should say, from 1950 until just last year. So we have definitely had our fair share of tornadic activity that has been out there in the last couple of years. So also, I just wanted to, again, throw a couple more tornado facts out to you real quick before we really start to wrap things up. People like to usually ask, what was the deadliest tornado? When was the strongest tornado? Those kinds of questions. And actually, the deadliest tornado in all of our time has come in 1925. That was what we call the tri-state tornado. It unfortunately killed 695 people and went through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. Now, that is before the modern time of tracking tornadic activity. But since 1950, the Joplin tornado has been was the strongest and the most deadly tornado. That's the one that rolled through in the early 2010, 2011 time frame. Joplin, Missouri, 158 people passed away in that. I actually drove through Joplin, Missouri a few years ago, and there is still issues in the town. There are still problems that you can still see damage. You can still see destruction from that tornado that rolled through. And again, it killed 158 people. So those are the two most deadly tornadoes in United States history, both pre and postmodern time. Our largest outbreak actually happened in 2011 in the United States, and that happened in Alabama. In a 24-hour time frame, there was 175 tornadoes. Again, in a 24-hour time frame. If you remember from 2011 and that Alabama outbreak, it actually went through Tuscaloosa, and there's University of Alabama had more than a fair share of problems, and actually a few students from the University of Alabama did pass away in that outbreak in April of 2011. On average, about 1,200 tornadoes happen per year in the United States. So right now, as I said, we've had 66 tornadoes that have officially happened so far in the U.S., but the season is just getting started. So again, 1,200 is potentially what we're looking at for a year's worth of tornadic activity across the U.S. And in general, on average per year, unfortunately, about 60 people do pass away from tornadoes every year. So we'll hopefully be well under that number this year. Hopefully we don't have any problems with people having fatalities with tornadoes, but unfortunately they do happen, and on average about 60 people do pass away. Let's go and take our look at our Facebook Live questions one more time. People are asking, are we expecting a tornado? No, we're not expecting a tornado. We are not under any kind of severe weather advisory. We don't have to worry about that. This is just CBS Philly's severe weather week. And again, today is our first day of the week. It's going to be going all the way through Friday. Today's topic just happens to be tornadoes, but we are not going to be experiencing any tornadoes today. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be 70 degrees. It's going to be a wonderful afternoon for everybody involved. Let's go back and take a look at cbsphilly.com/weather week. People are asking, how long do tornadoes typically last? As I said, they usually last only a couple of minutes, but they could potentially last a little bit longer than that. Also, somebody asked, is a twister the same as a tornado? Yes, they are the same. Twister is more of the vernacular. It's more of what we just say when speaking to maybe one another in common conversation. We say, oh, there was a twister, but it is a tornado. Tornado is just the technical term, whereas twister, again, is more along the lines of just a more of the vernacular that's used. And then we also asked, do tornadoes run on a path, or do they spiral aimlessly until it clears out? In general, there is a path. There's no clear path that every tornado takes. In general, you'll see tornadic activity, you'll see tornadic thunderstorms travel in a east to west or southwest to northeast direction. However, tornadoes are known to every once in a while to double back on themselves or possibly stay in one area for a relatively long period of time if it just seems that the environment does not allow it to eastwardly propagate. So there is the chance for it to potentially stay in one spot, but in general, we're not talking about an aimless wander. It is a general west to east or southwest to northeast motion, but that's just also because in general, that's the way weather tends to travel here in the mid-latitudes across the United States, in that west to east motion. But there's not a set track that every tornado is going to take. Also asking when tornado season is. We're getting into it right now. Once we get into that spring and early summer, that's when we have the best chance for tornadoes, when we get into that transitional period. So that's where we're at right now. And then we'll be watching this really throughout the summer. The better chance for us here in the Northeast is actually a little bit later than the folks out in the Midwest. We're looking more along the lines of that June, July time frame for us here across Pennsylvania. So actually, June has more tornadoes than any other month in Pennsylvania on record. Generally, since we've been keeping records, June has seen 346 tornadoes in Pennsylvania. So that's since the modern time. That's since about 1950 or so. Whereas, that's July has seen 346 tornadoes. Sorry about that. June has seen 175 and May has seen 139. So that May, June, July time frame for Pennsylvania is definitely the bullseye for us to have tornadic activity. And outside of our general vicinity, the place that usually sees the most tornadoes in Pennsylvania is out in Westmoreland County, which is just outside of the Pittsburgh area, where they have seen 35 tornadoes since 1950. So it's definitely getting into the season. As we take just one more look at our questions here, how quickly can a tornado strike? They can strike very quickly and they can leave just as quickly as they strike. They can spin up. We're talking in a matter of minutes, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds to a minute. It takes for it to spin up. It maybe only lasts for 5 minutes and it's gone. So they are very, very quick moving systems. They definitely are something that you definitely do not want to mess with. And that's why we tell everybody, if there is a watch, you don't go outside. And if there's a warning, you need to get to your safe place immediately. So we have been, we've been on for just about a half an hour or so. So we're going to start to wrap things up here. Just to let everybody know, again, this is Severe Weather Week here at CBS Philly. It starts today. We're talking about tornadoes through the afternoon, through our noon broadcast, and then into the evening and our nighttime broadcast as well. We'll also be getting into lightning tomorrow. We'll be talking about watches and warnings, the difference between all of them. There you see our Severe Weather Week. Tomorrow we're talking about lightning. We'll be talking to the National Weather Service. We'll be talking to the spokesman for safety for the National Weather Service as well on the national level. That's tomorrow. But just to give you a recap of what you can expect the rest of today in all of our newscasts, if you're curious about what to expect with tornadoes, today at noon, Chelsea Ingram's going to be going over the history of tornadoes for Philadelphia as well as the Delaware Valley. And then through the 5, 6, and 6:30 time frames, Lauren will be talking about the interaction between global warming and how that affects tornadic activity. Kate will be talking about bow echoes at 6:15. And then as we get into the later shows, 10, 11 o'clock, Kate will also be talking about fire tornadoes and how wildfires can interact with tornadic activity. So I'm meteorologist Matt Peterson. Hopefully I gave you an insight of what it's like to experience tornadoes, what it takes to form a tornado. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me, get in touch with the CBS Philly Eyewitness Weather Team, and hope everyone has a great Monday. And stay tuned for more weather knowledge today and through the rest of the week.